Hello everyone and welcome to the Hidden Lives of Writers. My name's Fiona Snyckers and I'm here with Gail Schimmel, who has a book out which I know is out there in the world and I have not yet got a copy of it as I sit here today, and I'm very jealous. But congratulations, Gail.
Thank you, Fiona, and we're going to have to remedy that you don't have a copy. I will be on to the relevant people.
I'm very happy to pay for it. I'm not a book bum, but I'm just, at the moment I would pay black market prices for that book. It looks so awesome. It's got a gorgeous cover. I love the premise.
We toyed with the whole secrets and lies concept,
Right.
And thought about Little Lies as a title, but my last book was called Never Tell a Lie.
And
we got a bit bogged down then in how much lying can you have in one literary career. So Little Secrets was the end title, but it's interesting because often when I write, the title I start with is the title I end with. But this book had a very personal title while I was a working title that I couldn't possibly have used. It didn't make any sense to anyone except me. And then it had another title that I thought was excellent and nobody else did. And then we came to Little Secrets. So you may notice as you hear me talk about it in the coming weeks that I often pause slightly before I get to the title because I'm going through like the Rolodex in my head trying to find what the title actually is.
But it does look awesome. Just introduce us a little bit to the premise of the book.
So basically it is about a woman called Monique who is very happily married to her husband Ben. And she's very happily married because she's determined to be very happily married. She has all she has ever wanted to be is a good wife and a good mother. And that is where she gets her satisfaction in life. And she works hard at it. And Ben meets a woman in a coffee shop.
And I hate her already.
At the same time, her daughter meets a woman at the gym. Mm-hmm. And these women are going to upset the balance of Monique's life.
Okay.
Da-da-da-da.
Oh, that sounds so intriguing. I really can't wait.
And then, okay, no, I won't say the rest. I was going to give a spoiler. I was going to really badly give a spoiler, but I won't. I'll stop talking right now.
So in the meantime, I'm having to satisfy myself with another piece of fiction, which is essentially about a marriage, and that is Diplomat or The Diplomat on Netflix. It's the sort of one of the hot shows at the moment. And it's about a woman who has just been made the American ambassador to London, but it's more about her marriage, about her relationship with her husband. And I'm enjoying it so much because the sexiest couple in the show are her and her husband. And basically it makes monogamy sexy. In a very interesting way.
That's a nice change.
Which appeals to me because I find marriage sexy and I find monogamy sexy. And it's got this interesting premise whereby this man actually has erectile dysfunction with everyone except his wife.
Okay, but Fiona, if they're monogamous, how does he know that?
Well, he sort of tries to stray, but he can't. It literally, nothing works except with his wife, which I think is a modification that all men should come with.
Completely. It would solve so many problems. It would certainly solve the people in my book's problem. Fiona, how has your writing week been?
Interesting. I've been working sort of under the supervision of essentially a script supervisor. My book Lacuna has been optioned for screen. No deals have been done yet or anything like that, but we're trying to hammer out a screenplay. And I'm learning so much. It's an incredibly steep learning curve. And I'm somebody who thought, I already know how to construct a story. But then I realized when it was pointed out to me that I had put 3 or 4 scenes, one after the other, in the same setting. Mm-hmm. And the script supervisor told me that on the screen, you cannot do that. The viewer's eye gets bored. It gets stale and tired from seeing the same setting over and over again. And I was so obsessed with, but the dialogue's different. They're different people there. There's things happening. These are important scenes. And didn't realize that how static it was to stay in the same setting for scene after scene after scene. And I think there are lessons to be learned there in our fiction as well.
Absolutely.
Because I do tend to keep things rather static.
That is so interesting you say so, because my co-writer, Kate Sidley, is always very aware of setting and making us change our setting, whereas I'm not. I would happily have them stay in one room for the whole book.
Yeah, and just talk to each other.
Absolutely, yeah, and say intelligent things, and that's enough. But Kate wants us to change settings, and people must move, and they must go and do things, and there must be physical action. And maybe, that is almost what one needs in screenwriting, but a very interesting lesson. It's going to make me look at my work in progress a little bit differently when I get back to the page today. Hopefully.
Yeah, speaking of getting back to the page, how has your writing week been?
When I hopefully get back to the page today, I should say, it's been odd.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've now changed from trying to write 500 words a day to writing 1,000 words a day. Mm-hmm. But what's really happening is I'm writing 1,000 words every 2 days. So the outcome is the same. Okay. And I've had a very busy week and quite a stressful week. So writing has been hard. And the only time I've managed it is while my son does jiu-jitsu and I sit in an incredibly uncomfortable chair, not designed for working at all. And I make myself hammer out those 1,000 words while he does jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
So if he did it a bit more often, my book would flow a bit faster. So a medium writing week.
Yeah, I think I've spoken before about the orthodontist appointment where you've got 20 wasted minutes and you can just sit there flicking through your phone or a magazine, or you can get 200 or 300 words done.
Maybe I need to throw the orthodontist into the mix. I did waste a good orthodontist appointment the other day.
And in terms of what you've been reading or watching or listening to?
So I have a confession. I have made it publicly previously, but you will remember when we interviewed Sue Nyati, I had not yet read, and I was open about it, I had not yet read An Angel's Demise.
Right.
And because I was too scared, Sue had told me it's a serious book, and I'm not up to serious stuff at the moment. But I had to read it because I'm interviewing Sue in another context where I actually have to know what's in the book. And I read it, and it is magnificent.
I quite agree.
So, yeah, a little lesson for me in maybe don't protect yourself so thoroughly from painful reading. I've actually had the experience as well recently with Margie Orford's book, In the Eye of the Beholder.
Right.
Which, again, very reluctant to read because she writes about violence against women, and I can't bear it.
Yeah.
But again, I had to read it, and absolutely gripping. So I think my lesson for the week is be careful what you protect yourself from, because maybe you're protecting yourself from a very good book.
Yeah. These are narratives where there's more going on. There's so much more going on in terms of character development and story and momentum. And, one's missing out on some good stuff. I also tend to protect myself.
And one can step back a bit from the violence. One can go, you know what? This is a book. It is made up. Don't go into it too deeply. So I try to read that part of the book a little bit, take myself out of the reader experience a bit and read it slightly more critically so that I don't get so upset by it. Although with both books, that was very difficult because you are so drawn in that you do get emotionally caught up. But two excellent reads and two reads that I would not have read if I didn't have to.
Okay, fantastic. Well, our guest today is Zukiswa Wanner. You know her from her books, The Madams from 2006, Behind Every Successful Man from 2008, Men of the South 2010, London, Cape Town, Joburg was 2014, Made in SA, 30 Ways to Leave Your Madam. I've got that as 2013.
That's 2013.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Then we have non-fiction like Hardly Working, children's picture books, and a middle grade book. That was The Black Pimpernel. Zukiswa is the winner of the Kaysello Dacre Award, the Goethe Medal.
Yeah, and I'm going to interrupt. I don't think we've got time to name all the things that she's the winner of. We'll be here all day.
An hour, you said.
So welcome, Zuki. It's so nice to have you here.
It's absolutely a pleasure to be here. So, funny story happened is that you sent me an email and you said, are we still on for the 5th? And then I was like, oh, I haven't got my ticket for SA. That's when I bought my ticket.
Oh my goodness, are you serious?
So I bought my ticket to be here.
Actually, yes, you've flown in only for this podcast. Well, I think that is quite right and proper. Everybody should be flying in for our podcast.
Yeah, for the privilege of talking to us. I think so.
There you go.
Let's start with you. You know, we always start with talking about our writing weeks. How has your writing week been?
I really admire that you guys actually have writing weeks. I don't write unless I have something to write, but I think the summary of my writing week has been emails, responding to them. And, I had to do, you know, when people ask you to do an abstract, I don't understand being asked to do an abstract, but I had to do an abstract, because I'm doing an Einstein lecture.
Oh, awesome.
See, I did that very smoothly.
Very, very impressive. But not just, I've got to pause that you don't write unless you've got something to write. But, you know, I feel compelled to always write. So when do you have something to write? Does an idea land in your head and then it wants to be written?
So usually an idea lands in my head and I let it swirl. So I'm like, I start thinking, how am I going to write this? How do I create this character? If it's fiction or nonfiction, whatever, how am I going to pursue this? And only when I feel that, you know, it's ready, I think I'm the type of writer who, rather than 1,000 words a day, I walk around with an idea idling and then I vomit out a manuscript, if you will.
We're going to talk about that a lot more, but I've got to give Fiona a chance to ask questions as well, because Fiona, I could do the whole hour just on that, unpacking that sentence.
Okay, so I want to go back to the beginning of your writing career with the Madams, which is a theme that you have revisited in your career, the maids and madams dynamic in South Africa.
Yes.
You revisited it in Made in South Africa, 30 Ways to Leave Your Madam, which was a hoot. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I still think of lines from that book.
Do you know what's crazy? That book is actually nonfiction, but satire. I interviewed domestic workers and I interviewed madams for that book. And, it was interesting. Obviously you've seen from the book that the madam side is thinner because the domestic workers know the madams more intimately than the madams know the domestic workers.
Right.
So
right.
So that was actually weirdly nonfiction.
And what is it about that dynamic that has attracted you so that you've written 2 books on the subject?
I think it's just, you know, a lot of women, we're in an age and an era where we talk about how we're feminists and, you know, and in fact, it's frowned upon to say you are not a feminist, right? And yet, from the very domestic sphere, the way we treat this, the way these women are treated, I've never had a maid. I don't know whether that's a badge of honor, but the way I've always observed from the outside looking in, that particular dynamic where it's, you know, a domestic worker is, you know, oh, can you go and get this for me? Can you do this for me? Can you, what you call it? But also, sometimes not even seeing her. So we'll have the type of, I've had conversations with my friends and I'll say will have because I'm, you know, although I've never had a domestic worker, I have also like just sat with my friends and we'll have a conversation where they don't see that the domestic worker is there. So this sordid details that you share and stuff. And you're like, and I always reflect and I think this person can bury you.
I'm going to make an observation about that because I'm afraid to say I fall very squarely into the madam camp. I would never be able to say the statement, I have never had a domestic worker. But I'm sometimes amazed. So I'll have a friend spilling their guts in front while Queen does the ironing in the background. And afterwards I'll say to Queen, did you hear what she said? Can you believe it? And Queen will go, I wasn't listening to you. Like, actually, my friend's problems are of so little interest to her that she's carrying on with her own inner life and her own thoughts. And I'm always, because I'm the sort of person that I would be listening and I would be keeping it in my head and I would be.
Wait until she writes a book.
Probably. Maybe I should write the book.
Incidentally, I'm actually going to Angola for the Portuguese launch of it.
Oh, fantastic. So the Madams is being brought out in Portuguese.
So yes, and I'm very excited about it because, I always said with my translations, I wanted them to be done on this continent first because I kind of feel that people here relate to it. And then if, it's taken in another country in Europe or whatever, great. But I kind of feel that people on this continent understand the dynamics of what I'm talking about. They understand the stuff. So, then I don't know whether you know Onjaki. He is a writer from Angola.
No.
But Onjaki started a publishing company in Angola, So Onjaki and I have kind of been doing the same treasure. Let's get into publishing. Let's do crazy stuff as if we don't have enough stuff on our plate. Perhaps that's why I don't write X amount of words a week.
We're going to come back to your words. Don't worry. We're going to revisit that statement.
But him and Jessimo Kasinda, who is in Mozambique, decided that they wanted to to do the translation of the Madams, So I said, okay, great. So they did the translation, so I'm going to Angola for the launch next week. And then I'll be in Mozambique for the launch in August. And what they're doing with Mozambique, the reason why it's going to be a while is because they're also doing a theatrical performance. So it's going to be, I'm looking forward to seeing what the playwrights do with it for the stage,
Fantastic.
That is so exciting.
I'm really excited.
And it will be very interesting to see how it's received by a different audience, by a non-South African audience.
Exactly.
It will really be interesting.
I'm really looking forward to it. And then it's going to be in Brazil next year.
Will you share this all on social media so that we can follow?
I probably will. I'm back on social media now.
Good.
I had some drama with Instagram and somebody hacked my Instagram.
Right.
And then I realized actually how much I didn't like social media. So I stayed off for a while. So I'm back now because I'm doing all these events.
We promise we won't troll you. We just want updates. Can we return to those words a day? But sorry, Fiona. Can I return to the words a day? Because I'm a bit obsessed with my words a day, and I felt like it was a personal attack that you said 1,000 words because of me writing 1,000 words a day. But
how's that working for you?
Yeah.
To use a Dr. Philism.
It works when it works. But when it doesn't work, it does become that I've made the whip for my own back. But I want to know, so you plan in your head. What does that look like? Do you take notes? Do you draw up a scheme? Or does it all just happen in your head? And then when you vomit it out, how fast do you vomit it out? Because this morning I listened to a podcast where a woman writes 6,000 words a day. Oh my goodness. Do you write 6,000 words a day?
When I'm vomiting out, I do, sometimes more. Yeah.
Wow.
So the upcoming novel, Love, Marry, Kill.
Mm-hmm. I saw a sneak peek of that.
You had a sneak peek of it.
Yeah.
The upcoming novel is, I did a few notes, and generally my notes is, I tend to write character-driven narratives, generally. So my notes is, okay, where's this person? How did they grow up? And so while I was doing that, so I've got a character called Akani in there. And so he grew up in Thembisa. So I've got a friend who's got a bottle store. I call it a shebeen. It is a shebeen. Who's got a shebeen in Thembisa, and I went and I was serving there for a while, so I'd actually just get into place, and that characters in that place that I was seeing and stuff, and you know, and there's a guy there who's short and is always, an old man, and he's always very, you know, snazzily dressed, you know, and he wears this fedoras and stuff, you know, and I thought myself, I can't waste this guy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, of course, I changed him a little bit. I gave him one arm.
Fair enough.
You know.
Sometimes somebody has to have only one arm.
Yeah, I gave him one arm, but you know, he's a murderer for hire, mm-hmm. with one arm, a one-armed murderer for hire. Mm-hmm. I thought that.
When do we get this book? When is it out?
You know, if it was up to Kwela, it would be out like next week. But my agent preferred that we try and sell it in the US and UK first, and so I told them to wait until next year.
Next year?
Yeah. No,
I don't
good
think
things.
that's right.
We must wait for good things.
I'll sit in a little depression now while you go ahead, Fiona.
Yeah, I want to look back on when you were starting out, which was more or less when I was starting out.
Yeah.
So as a black writer back in, let's say, 2007, 2008, you would write a book and you would approach a white publisher to publish it. And a white reviewer would review it, and you would go to a white-owned literary festival and talk about your work in front of a white audience. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to today, 2023. You have your own publishing imprint. You have created an entire online literary festival, which focuses on African literature. The reviewer landscape has changed. And a lot of this you made happen.
Well, I don't know. You give me a lot of credit here.
You actually deserve a lot of credit because the whole literary landscape has transformed. And I do see you as a mover of that. How intentional were you in sort of getting these properties into black hands?
I think a lot of it with me was just really recognizing, you know, there's this weird thing that happened when the Madams came out in 2006. I remember even with the launch, I called my then publisher, you know, and I said, so they're like, the book is out, you know, we're sending you copies. I said, so where's the launch? And he said, there's no budget for the launch.
Yes, I remember those days.
I remember those days.
So they said, there's no budget for the launch. I'm like, flip. You know, so I went to the then, remember when Shara Books was in Newtown, you know, when Newtown was a vibe. So I went to Shara Books and I talked to June Josephs, Mandlalanga's partner.
Yep.
And, I said to June, listen, I need to launch my book. Can you make it happen? And she said, oh, can you send me a blurb of the book? And I sent her and she said to me, oh, I have just the person, you know? So she hooked me up with a person for the launch. And my discussant was this literary academic doctor who in the end, I published her first novel, adult novel, Nokuthula Mazibuko Msimang.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
What a story.
I know, right?
What a story. I'm traumatized remembering those days of no launches. And
I know, right?
Yeah, I actually.
But remember, we also had a very fantastic vibe, like the Joburg writers, where we used to do stuff with Louis Greenberg, the whole bunch of us, and Catherine White, and you know,
yeah, we
remember?
made it happen because nobody else
was making it happen for us.
Yeah.
I remember we did that trip to the Eastern Cape, which was like a riot. It's a pity that you left, man, early because hey, things happened.
I wasn't in with the in crowd at this stage.
No, we're the cool
obviously.
kids in.
Oh.
Sorry, Gail, you weren't looking for the cool kids. But but it was something that I was like, I wanted to do it. So then people were saying, even publishers would be like, the average reader is a middle class white woman, you know? And then I remembered that I'd taken the Madams to Soweto and I'd given a copy to my cousin. So at some point in time, I'd been invited for something, and I realized I was out of copies. So I went to Normandy and I said, cuz where's my borrow that copy of yours and I'll give it back. And she said, oh, no, I don't have it. And she said, I gave it to Lindy. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then I went to Lindy. Lindy said she'd passed it on to somebody. So essentially the whole road had read my book, but they just read that one copy. And I thought, wow, clearly people are reading, but we need to tell them then that it's okay to buy books, and so essentially when people say to me, oh, books are expensive, I'm like, 200 rand. How much do you use on a bottle of wine? Do you think that maybe you can sacrifice a bottle of wine? Maybe. I mean, we shouldn't sacrifice wine, but
in an ideal world, you'll have the bottle of wine with the book and you'll combine it into a happy event. But I'd choose the book any day, I have to admit. But yeah,
would you?
I would. I'm afraid so. I mean, we could have a whole separate discussion about that.
I realized that South Africa was very closed, and I thought I wanted to move to the rest of the continent. And so, my moving to Kenya was actually a very deliberate thing.
Right.
I mean, I thought to myself, there were other interests. I thought to myself, I didn't really want to raise my son here because, toxicity. I mean, there is a level of toxicity there as well, but I just wanted him to get a wider worldview or continental view, if you will. And, but my moving to Kenya was really, I think, probably was the thing that really turned everything on its head, because when I moved there, everybody believes that South Africa is Afrophobic. So now you had the South African who moved to another African country, and not to Europe and not to the US. And the rest of the continent was like, oh, maybe you're all right, And with that, they then decided I was their South African literary expert. So then they started asking me, oh, we need this, we need that. So, when Lola started Ake Festival, she was like, can you be on the advisory board? I was like, oh, okay, So every year that she did Ake Festival, it's like, who do you think we should invite from South Africa? Who do you think we should invite from Angola? And so forth and so on,
Which raises a question that I always ask people, which is, how did you come to writing? Because you've really made a career deeply entrenched in writing. You write, but you also do all these, I think, Fiona, you used the phrase writing adjacent activities, which I love. Did you start out, is that what you were always going to be, or are you actually an accountant secretly?
Somebody saying you're secretly you work for the national intelligence because you're always traveling. So maybe that's my secret job. Maybe. But no, I didn't plan it, but I think as happens with Fiona, with Angela, we both started in journalism, and so I started in journalism, and then, I very, very quickly realized, well, I didn't realize, the late Louis Nkosi made me realize it, because, I remember him saying that, oh, you should write a novel, because I used to send him like little snippets of, opinion pieces and what, and I suppose that means that my creative nonfiction really sucked. And he said, you should write fiction. And I say to him, I'm too much of a realist to write fiction. The foibles of youth. But I realized, and then he's like, oh, that's such bull, So I kind of took it as a challenge. And that's actually how the Madams came about. And I still obviously do quite a bit of nonfiction, as a few of my, Black Pimpernel, for instance, and Hardly Working. But I realized something very interesting with fiction. It's freeing So you can say all the things that you want without being sued. So
Most of the time.
Most of the time. I mean, you'd have to prove to me that it's you, right? It's difficult to stand
Well,
in
we
court.
now know about the one-armed man.
Well, nah, you know, there are a lot of short men in that area, so.
That's a short man.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about Men of the South. Okay. Now, that book was written and came out at a time when toxic masculinity wasn't even a phrase in the common parlance. And people weren't looking closely at men and masculinity. But you were, I think, one of the first in South Africa to look at it. And now, some years later, I would venture to say that the situation is not better. It's possibly worse. And men are turning to these extremely toxic role models to
Who is that guy on whatever who's big on YouTube or whatever that they love so much?
I'm thinking of Andrew Tate. I'm
Yes,
thinking of Ben
Andrew
Shapiro.
Tate.
I'm thinking of Jordan Peterson.
Exactly.
These guys are getting to our sons at a young and impressionable age and leading them down the path of misogyny, misogynoir. What can we do? What can a feminist mom do to sort of counteract this?
You know, it's difficult, but I've been very lucky, I think, as a parent, because my son is like, oh yeah, no, this guy is like Andrew Tate. He's problematic, mom, you know. So he realizes it. But I remember having a conversation with him where he said, oh yeah, you know, so he likes cooking a lot and cleaning, and I hate cleaning, but I like cooking. So he was like, oh, he was talking about something, and then I said, and I remember I gave a response, and then he said to me, oh, that's not very feminist of you. Like, he checked me. And I was like, wait, hey, aren't we having like a no holds barred mother-son conversation? So I don't know, man. You know, like, I suppose one of the things that I have done is surrounded my son with positive male and female role models. I think that generally makes a difference. So that guys he aspires to, but is also very self-aware, and that's very important in anybody, not just children, but ourselves as well. He's also very self-aware. So even when he meets a problematic somebody that he likes, he can still say, oh, I like them. And I like this about them, but this is what's problematic about them, you know. And
Right,
I think that's generally very important. And I hope, obviously, that he stays that way. He's turning 18 very soon.
It's interesting because it's quite a writerly way of looking at people and seeing the nuances of people, because I think often a good character in a book is a character where there are those nuances that you can be both a good and bad person. So maybe you've passed on a bit of that writerly view of the world.
Interestingly enough, he does is very artistic, which is why it's a bit heartbreaking that he said he wants to do medicine. And I told him, obviously I had to tell him, because you know, he writes, when he does the writing, like, you know, I've got like fantastic reports on his creative fiction, on his creative stuff, but he also plays, the piano and the guitar, and is self-taught on the saxophone, you know, so he's very artistic.
Let me get this straight. Am I sitting talking to a mother who's disappointed that her child wants to be a doctor? Is that what is actually happening in this room?
Yes, actually, because so I said to him, are you sure you want to be a doctor? He said yes, he wants to be a doctor. I said, do you realize that doctors are the profession with the highest suicide rate. So
Encouraging.
so it's like, that's what I want to do. I was like, are you sure you don't want to be like a musician? Like, it's like, I still do music, but I don't want to be a musician. I'm like, wow, I've been like surrounding you with musicians and visual artists and actors and you're saying you don't want this life? Is like, I don't want this broke life. I'm like, doctor is not really like,
so
the unemployed doctors.
It's interesting though that you say that, because I am the child of an artist and I actively chose a career path that would make money. I think often the children of autistic people want the money path. I became a lawyer.
Wow.
I'm a lawyer by profession. So there is a reaction, but the good news is.
But can you tell us about Thabo Bester?
You still come back. No, nobody can explain that. But you still come back to the art. And if he's autistic, you come back to it. You find your way to it.
Well, we hope.
Yeah. And I'm sure he's read books by a certain South African doctor who's also a writer.
He actually reads a lot. Like, he reads voraciously. He like, now when he's doing his A levels now, he was doing O levels. So from year 1 up until O levels, he was in Kenya, and he decided he wanted to be in another African country before he comes to. So he's doing his A levels in Zimbabwe now.
Okay.
And then he says he wants to do university here. So I'm like, okay, cool. But he was like, as he was packing 3 days ago to go to Zim, he was like, oh yeah, no, I need some books, to read whatever. So I said, okay, cool. So he reads voraciously. In fact, he's actually been a better reader for quite a few books that have come out.
Okay.
On young adults. So there is like 2 Nigerian writers that he's been a better reader for. And so
that's very interesting, and what a nice job for a young man.
And I always tell them to pay him, and when they pay him, then I kind of forget that. I just remember that there's something that I need to pay, and can I borrow your money, like money?
I want to come back to something you said earlier about readers and the middle class white woman being the kind of target reader, and then that experience you had with the book being passed from woman to woman in the street. And because my feeling is that there is this huge unexplored Black middle class woman reader, and that actually is where our readers are sitting. And is with your publishing endeavors and with your literary festivals, are you finding that that's the truth? Are we reaching those women?
Actually, that is where we are now, because one of the most influential people right now is Lorraine Stolley, and she has a book club, and that book club, they do wonders with that book club. And there are all these book clubs that are coming out, that have come out, and they're unapologetic, and they're brilliant. And I've been lucky where I hear sometimes like, oh, there's a book club, we're having a book club meet, and I'm like, can I just come and be a guest, And it's always so brilliant because, so I think that space has arrived, because even publishers, the Pan Macmillans, the Quellers, the Penguins, they are sending their books to these women and saying, can you do our authors' books? And that to me is amazing. So yeah, I think we're there now in South Africa. And it's interesting also because it's oddly become a very continental trend. I see it in Kenya, I see it in Nigeria, I see it in Ghana, I see it, where there's this bunch of women who come and they turn up at books, and, the old trend that existed, which is that the average reader is a woman, is very much in existence. The average reader of nonfiction, the average reader of fiction and nonfiction, by the way, men, I don't know, men are into 7 habits of deadly people, or whatever it is.
I think understanding men is beyond the scope of this conversation.
Of this conversation, yeah?
Zooks, I see you very much as a super connector. You connect people and you connect books to people. I remember years ago getting a call or a text from you saying, the Obamas are in town. They've got Sasha and Malia with them. I want to get Trinity into their hands. And we kind of rushed around and found a copy. And that impulse to get books into the hands of the right people across countries, across the African continent, that is something that I've always seen you doing. And was that the basis for your literary festival? Just knowing which books to get into the hands of which people?
Yeah, absolutely. There was that, because I kept thinking, I know all these fabulous books and all these fantastic writers, but how come so many people don't know them, you know? And so I wanted to share that, because what I do is I generally give books. So people will say, I've got family members who say, oh, I don't read. And I'm like, no, actually you do. I have a book for you. And I'll get them a book and I'll say, read page 1. If you don't like it, leave it. It has never failed. Ever. You know? And I'm talking about like ever failed in my like 17-year career. I always do that. I'm like, okay, this book is for this person. This book is for this person. But beyond that, because I do that, I'm actually doing a very interesting project. I don't know why I keep doing these things, but I'm doing you know the Decameron. Yeah. So I'm doing something similar, but what I'm doing is we've got a bunch of writers and each is taking over from the other and stuff and everything across the continent. It's very exciting, and we're about a quarter way through, you know. So we've had 4 writers. We're on the 5th writer today. They're submitting their continuation of the story. So it's going to be a novel, but written by a whole bunch of people. And
how fun.
I'm so excited about it.
I've always pictured doing that at a literary festival, having it happen live. That you start the book in the morning and you have different writers come and do it live with people watching it on a screen. So I love that idea. Let me know when that one's done.
Oh yeah, no. So we're actually doing the editing in August. You know?
Wow.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm excited about it.
Well, this is what's striking me about you. You're excited about everything. You are full with excitement.
I'm a life of excitement.
You really are. It's very, very inspiring. And I'm hoping that I'm going to like suck off your energy and walk out of here with some of that energy. I want to talk to you about your children's writing. And I'm presuming you're excited about that because you're excited about everything. But I want to know, how is it different? How is the excitement writing for adults, writing for children? How is it a different experience? How is it the same experience?
I have to say that I'm personally, I was very happy to do Love, Marry, Kill because I was happy to write for adults again. You know, children are very specific. You always have to realize, okay, I can't do this particular language. I can't do this. I can't. Hey, do you understand using the F word again? And I look how beautiful it is.
I really do.
You know? So it's, so writing for children. And then you kind of also then have to get into a space where, you know, at what level, do I do this particular thing? But also, you don't want to talk down to children because children are more intelligent than a lot of adults give them credit for, you know, and they're also more incisive and yeah.
And they read up. Children tend to read a level above themselves.
Exactly. So they always surprise you. So constantly, it's like doing that balance. It's like being on a seesaw, but just.
And how do you decide? You get an idea, and how do you decide, I'm going to make this for young children, I'm going to make this for middle grade children, I'm going to make this more young adults?
Okay, so at least 3 of the children's stuff were weirdly commissioned.
Okay.
Yeah. So 1 wasn't. The first one, so Refilwe was, I think, Jacana was doing a project with, I think, one of the reading, NGOs. And they asked me, they asked Cindy Way, they asked Maggie Orford, they asked a bunch of us to take a traditional fairy tale and reimagine it. And so quite a few of the others they stayed pretty true to whatever. Hey, me, I just went wild. I'm like, yeah, no, Rapunzel is now going to be a black girl in Lesotho, because I also wanted to get out of South Africa, but without getting out of South Africa. So I wanted it to be like recognizable, and she's got dreadlocks instead of like, blonde hair, and she stays in a cave on top of a mountain. So, I just wanted to go wild with it. And, because Refilwe also means gift, and I wanted to make it whatever. And of course, the mother, when she's pregnant, she's craving, she isn't craving the Rapunzel plant, she's craving morojo. So let's go wild. Let's just, pumpkin leaves or something, So I had a lot of fun with it. And, I love that it has, then had beautiful energy to it because, it's actually, currently on, stage in London.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's been adopted for stage. In North London. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm really happy about that. And I remember talking to the playwright about it, and she was like, yeah. Oh, and then she was like, yeah, but isn't this, when you talk to somebody and they're like, yeah, but isn't this like, this person isn't this ableist and whatever? And I said, that's life though.
Life is ableist.
So and please understand also that it's fiction, and people will say certain things in fiction, and that are actually true to life. I always say fiction to me is generally more true to life than nonfiction, because I tend to censor myself when I write nonfiction because, yeah.
Let's talk about this. And sorry, Fiona, I'm doing it again where I asked 3 questions in a row instead of taking my turn. But let's talk about this thing about being politically correct in writing and checking yourself.
Oh, God.
And being woke about how you write and not being ableist and not being this and not being that. Are you finding it's affecting your writing?
Oh, no. I refuse to let it affect my writing. I refuse to let it affect my writing. In fact, one of the things that I did for a very long time, and it had been a very deliberate thing on my part, is every one of my novels had a gay character or a lesbian character.
Awesome.
The novel that's coming, that's the first one that doesn't. And it's because I realize everybody else is doing it now. So, I think my work is done, So now I just want to tell a story.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I recently went to a book launch. It was Ntikeng Mohlele's collection of short stories. And was at the Market Theatre, and part of the launch was actors reading out part of the stories. And I thought to myself, I have seen this before and I know where it came from. And I think you pioneered that turning the book launch into a kind of staged thing where actors perform. I think you got money from the film board. I still don't know how you did that exactly.
I'm a hustler, baby.
So is that something you still do? Like, what inspired it?
So I wanted my favorite type of books. What are your favorite type of books? My favorite types of books is I love books that tell a story. So I always favor plot over I mean, obviously you want beautiful writing as well as plot, but when I'm doing workshops, I generally favor writers who give me a good plot, versus good writing but there's no story.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So I love stories. And so in my writing, and I've generally wanted to tell a story, it might be like from multiple perspectives, it might be whatever, but generally telling a story. And so I wanted people to understand that essentially books are storytelling. It's just telling a story. And if somebody is not, says they don't read, they might be tempted to read if they see, visuals of it, a performance of it. Mm-hmm. And, it's something that's, I thought about it with, obviously I did it with Men of the South and London, Cape Town, Joburg. And in fact, I was calling into King. I said, I see you're learning. I was like, I see you're learning. I heard you just did this, this launch, and, you did it this way, and it was like, yeah. But it's something that I'm still doing, and I did it even in a curatorial way. This is gorgeous. This is from Megan did this.
Okay, we are looking at the cover of, what are we looking at?
So this is Artistic Encounters. It's something that I curate, and I started doing it years ago. I invited the then director of the Goethe Institute in Nairobi. I met her and we vibed and we were just laughing. It was at some event and we're drinking and laughing and whatever. And I said, hey, you cool? We should hang out. And she was like, oh, cool. So I got her number and stuff and I said, hey, come to my house, for lunch or dinner and whatever. Because I like hanging out with people. I like, that I vibe. So she came to my house and, and we became friends. And she said, you know what? I've been in this country for X amount of years. This is actually the first time that I've been invited to somebody's house. People generally come to me because they want funding, and I invite people to, my house, but I've never been invited to anybody's house. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'm not people. I'm looking so bad, So then, she then said, hey, you've stayed in all these places. I wonder whether you would be interested in curating something, with refugees and whatever, because they were doing a focus on refugees. I think it was the Goethe Institute in Nairobi and, it was all the Goethe Institutes in Alliance Francaise, Brexit had already Brexited. But they hadn't Brexited then, but, British Council hasn't really been whatever, but they came together. So I said, oh yeah, no, I'd be happy to. So I did this thing and, it was, one of the writers were published by Quella actually years ago. And he's like, South Sudanese, and he was talking about how he was a lost boy.
Yes, I remember. Yes. He was published when I was first published. Yes, he was amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So I just said, give me the budget. And I flew him in from South Sudan. He's a lawyer there now. He's been staying there for ages. So I flew him in. I had like a whole bunch of other people. I had Yvonne Owo for internal displacement. So I had like these different panels, internal displacement, external displacement, etc., etc. And it went well. And then I said to her, I did this for you because you're my friend. But what I'd really love to do is have literature come together with like a different art form. And she said, can you write me a brief on how you see it? So I wrote her a brief on it, Artistic Encounters. That became Artistic Encounters. I said I wanted to see Kole Kaputuma on stage with Victor A. Kameno, who's a writer, but also a visual artist. So Koleka was, so the very first Artistic Encounters happened in 2017 in Nairobi. And we had Koleka Putuma reciting her poetry and Victor A. Kameno drawing what he was understanding from the poetry and stuff. And we've then since had music but always literature is the base, music and literature, actors and literature, this and that. Ange came through when she did Blessed Girl, and Nairobi was like really excited to have her because there is this woman called Vera Sidika, who's like plastic surgery, bleaching, very much like everybody was like, oh my God, you wrote about it. Like, no, I didn't even know her. So I had to show her. I was like, hey, this is the one everybody thinks, and the place was packed, I've had Lola Shonin, etc., etc. I was then asked to curate Lit Africa 2 in Zurich by Stiftung Litter and Strauhoff Museum. And I said to them, so they said, how do you see it? So the first one, they had like, the Let's, Al Imfeld. He had all these interviews with all these amazing writers, from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, African writers, like across. It was just amazing, like, but mostly like Francophone and Lusophone. And then they say to me, we'd like you to curate, Lit Africa 2. And I'd seen already what Al had done. And I said, no, I'd really like some of my contemporaries. And, they said to me, oh, okay. And I said, I want it to be an artistic encounters type of exhibition, and I want art, I want, literature and other art forms. So I have, just for your listeners, I've got Ishmael Bear, long way gone, but him as a novelist. And his novel Radiance of Tomorrow. And I coupled him up with a young artist that I met, 16-year-old, 17, called Shafiq Manzi from Rwanda. Oh. So Sierra Leone, Rwanda. I have Virgilia Ferrao from Mozambique for a novel Osnosos Feitikos, with Yusara Campbell from Sao Tome and Principe. Then I have Abubakar Adam Ibrahim from Nigeria, with Maimuna Jallo from Gambia. She's an actress. And Yusara is also an actress. So two actresses. And then Angela Makolwa, South Africa, with Michael Soy, who's a visual artist. So he drew, but we used critical but stable. So he drew his interpretation of the excerpt. And then we have Jennifer Makumbi from Uganda, with Ntombebi Ntobela, who's an artist as well, but she does like beading. Ooh. And she is in KZN. They do amazing work. And then we have Yara Nakayanda Montero from Angola, with Zab's The Last Letter, our hip hop artist right here. With Fiston Montamajila from DR Congo, with Prudence Katomeni from Zimbabwe, we have Onjaki from Angola, with Sereti from Botswana. So, yeah. And the magic that has just come out of it is the person who has to do 3 has got a tough act to follow. But yeah,
this was what I was saying. You're a super connector.
Absolutely, yeah. That I've got exhausted listening to the list of countries. I was, how does she do that?
Zuki, we always ask our guests what they are reading or watching or listening to fill up the creative well at the moment. Either something that's been great or not so great or just made an impression on you.
Okay. What are you reading? What are you guys reading?
You go first.
All right. Okay. So I'm reading this, The Miracle Game. I'm really loving it.
Mm-hmm. That looks very difficult.
Josef
Skvoretzky. He's a Czech writer, but stays in Canada now. But it's really like, it's set during the Cold War, mm-hmm. And the main character is a writer, and he's observing these things, but he can't say certain things because he's not a member of the Communist Party, but he needs to like maneuver so that he never pisses off and gets arrested,
mm-hmm.
So I'm really, really enjoying it. I just finished, Milk the Beloved Country by Sihle Kumalo, and my God, I think it's his best work so far. It's just
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking as well because you're like, We don't have a country, guys.
Okay, I'll be skipping that one. I did earlier today say that
we have a geographical location, but not a country.
So you are not ever going to be content to let South Africans stay in South Africa, read South African writers, and in Ghana they just read their own writers. You want the continent to be aware of each other.
I want the continent to be aware of each other. I want the continent to be, one of the things that I keep telling people, somebody should actually just start paying me at Ministry of Arts and Culture, is that, right now, South Africa is outwriting everybody on this continent. South Africa, the 56 million of us or whatever, South Africa is outwriting everybody on the continent. The problem is nobody knows South African literature because our publishing companies are like, they look at the South African audience and then they look at like, let's go to Frankfurt Book Fair. Let's go to London Book Fair. I have never seen any South African publisher at any literary festivals or book fair on this continent. And it's crazy because the stories that we're writing relate to the people on the continent. They're interested. They want to know what's happening. But we don't have that, Our stuff is so varied and wild and crazy and beautiful and stuff. When I even mention names, people are like, who's that? And it's sad because we are really like doing magic. But I suppose it's in politicians' interest that we don't read, that people, our work is not known or whatever. But it's crazy. It's beautiful. So please, to me, like my dream would be like, if South African publishers actually got South African books in bookstores outside of South Africa, but on this continent.
From your lips to their ears.
For sure. So, Zuki, what can we expect from you next? It's Love, Marry, Kill.
Love, Marry, Kill.
Can you give us a little peek at it? Just give us the premise of it.
So it's really written from a male and female perspective. And it's a woman who is married and a man who's married, but they meet and then they fall in love.
So they're not married to each other.
They're not married to each other. They're married to other people.
Okay.
And this particular one, because it comes out, and then there's a guy who's hired to kill somebody.
Cannot wait.
Exciting. Well, we want everyone to check that out when it comes.
When it comes out. But you guys didn't say what you're reading.
Yeah, Gail's just read An Angel's Demise by Sunyati.
Oh, all right.
Absolutely loved it.
I loved it. So this is, I was saying earlier that I didn't want to read it because I was scared because Sue had told me it's quite heavy and I'm not reading heavy at the moment. And then I had to read it. And I'm so pleased I did. And it's actually, as you were speaking, I was thinking about it, that my lesson from it, as I've already said today, is that I must be braver about what I read. I mustn't protect myself. And then I just heard myself saying, oh, I'm not going to read that. That sounds too heavy. And I've got to stop protecting myself from reading the heavy stuff. So I loved An Angel's Demise.
Oh, fantastic. Looking forward to it, actually. Because when it launched, I wasn't in town and I didn't see any copies at Time of the Writer in Durban, So, yeah, definitely on my to-buy list today.
Off you go, straight to exclusive books, but immediately.
I am going to Rosebank and I'm getting a copy.
Thanks, Zuki.
Thank you very much, guys.
Gail, I am feeling so energized by talking to Zukiswa, and I think you are as well.
I'm feeling a weird combination of energized and exhausted because all that energy, I'm like, I'm not up to those levels of energy.
But it's inspiring. I mean, what she's done, what she's achieved, she just has to think something and it becomes a reality.
Well, that's actually exactly what I was going to say to you. What I've taken out of this is she tells these stories and she says, and then I thought I'd love to do, and then she does.
Yes.
I often think I'd love to do, and then I go and have a nap. So I was very inspired by that.
Yeah, it just makes you look at the potential for the rest of your career in a whole different light.
And now I need to go and have a nap just having listened to you say to that sentence. But yeah, really so much energy, so inspiring, and so she makes things happen.
She really does. And one thing that I got from it was the way Zuki is not content to let us all live in our silos, stay in our countries and sort of remain inward looking, but really to connect the different countries on this continent. And I think we as writers, perhaps maybe especially as white writers, when we think of publishing our work beyond the borders of South Africa, we think in terms of America, we think in terms of Britain, maybe translation rights into Europe, and we don't think enough about our own continent and this huge untapped market that's out there.
100%. That made me pause and stop and weigh up myself and check my biases, that it has not occurred to me that you could sell translation rights to Angola. Hasn't crossed my mind.
Yeah. Portuguese is Angola, Mozambique, and then Brazil as well, apparently.
Extraordinary. Fiona, what is your writing advice for the week?
Okay, well, it grows out of what I was saying earlier about this learning curve that I've been on in terms of turning a book into a screenplay, and how you cannot let it be too static. You can't stay in one physical location for too long. And it got me thinking about other ways of keeping things fresh in writing. I've noticed when I'm reading my own work and when I'm reading other people's work, if you get stuck in dialogue for too long, it becomes very exhausting to read. And likewise, if you get stuck in a flashback or exposition or world building for too long, you just become a bit weary. You get a bit sick of it and you want something new. There's this kind of craving for novelty that we as a reading audience need. And it's useful to bear that in mind and to read over your manuscript and just think, is this too much dialogue? Is this too much exposition? Have I remained in this kind of phase of writing for too long, and do I need to mix it up with something else?
Just as you talk, I'm thinking if you were an unlazy writer, so not me, but you could highlight, like, this is dialogue in one color, this is setting in another color, and check that your colors are changing.
Yes.
You could be quite clever about it. And I think there's probably writing software that could help one do that in a very clever way.
Yeah. Just to visualize it, to see, because we are kind of wrapped up and interested in what we're doing and don't realize that we've kept our characters static for too long.
I think I'm going to be writing in a whole different way this afternoon if I ever get to that point of the day, but
after your nap. And what about you, Gail? What tips have you got?
So I recently had an interesting Twitter dip in where Margie Orford was asking people how they name their characters. And I have actually quite a strong method I have discovered. So I thought I would share that, as I did on Twitter, which is that what I will do is I will work out when my character was born, which will be dictated by the plot of the book. And then I will think about the type of parents, the type of world my character comes from. Would they have been named the most popular names of the day? Would they have been named the less popular names of the day? And then I'll go into one of those lists that you find easily online of top 100 names for 1972. And I will think where about in the list I want to be, maybe this is someone who would have a very popular name. And then I'll think, okay, I'm going to look, what's name number 4?
Right.
And I'll look at name number 4. If it resonates with me, I'll use it. If it clearly is not a name I can use because it doesn't resonate or because it's a name that's too close to me, has too much attached to it for me, then I'll move up and down the list looking around there. But I'll use those lists a lot. And then what I'll often do with siblings is if I've chosen name number 54, for the one sibling, I'll go into the boys list and look at name number 54 because those parents are probably naming at that level. You know how these name trends work.
Yes.
And what I like about that method is that then when somebody the age of my character is reading, they're not going to go, no, that's not a name people my age are called. It's going to resonate because they're going to have known a certain number of those people. So that is my character method. Not always. Sometimes a name just comes to me and I use it. But when I don't know what to do, that's how I name a character.
And I would like to add to that, be careful not to have the same initial letter.
100%.
For all. So don't have a Margie, a Michelle, a Mary, and a Mame in the same manuscript because it is so confusing to the reader.
And it's something that for some reason one does.
Yes,
that you
why
get
is that?
obsessed. I don't know. You get obsessed with a letter and you name everybody that letter. And international publishers actually won't put up with it. They make you change the name. I think American publishers in particular are very aware that some readers are lazy and they don't read the whole name. They just kind of look at the first letter and then you can cause terrible confusion. I read a book the other day with an Adam and an Alan.
Oh,
and
no,
I didn't know what was going on half the time.
No, you can't do that. Well, if our listeners have got a brilliant way of naming characters or a great way of keeping things fresh with their plot construction, please let us know. We are on social media. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. And we would love to hear from you.
You've been listening to another production from Solid Gold Podcasts.